The old grandfather clock in the corner of the conservatory's main hall chimed 6 times. Most of the students had already left for the day, their excited chatter fading into the evening air. May gently pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway, the wheels squeaking slightly against the polished marble floor. She was in no rush. This was her favorite time at the prestigious Rose Hill Music Conservatory when the building fell quiet and she could work in peace. May had been the evening custodian at the conservatory for almost 7 years now. At 42, she blended into the background like a shadow. Her plain navy uniform, her hair always pulled back in a simple bun, and her quiet demeanor made her nearly invisible to the students and teachers who passed her in the halls day after day. "Good evening, Ms. May," called Professor Chen, one of the few faculty members who actually noticed her. He was locking his office door, briefcase in hand. "Good evening, Professor," May replied with a small bow of her head. "Have a nice weekend." The professor nodded and continued down the hall, his footsteps echoing until they disappeared behind the heavy front doors. May smiled to herself. Now she was truly alone. She continued her familiar routine, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, and dusting the framed photographs of famous musicians who had once walked these same halls. Some had performed on the very stage in the auditorium where she now swept. Her fingers lingered on a frame containing a photo of the great pianist Vladimir Horowitz. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. May worked methodically through the building, floor by floor, room by room. The practice rooms were always the messiest. Abandoned coffee cups, crumpled sheet music, and the occasional forgotten sweater. But they were also her favorite spaces to clean. In room 12, someone had left the window open. The evening breeze had scattered pages of music across the floor. May knelt down, gathering them carefully. Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. She hummed the opening notes as she stacked the pages neatly on the piano. Her eyes drifted to the beautiful baby grand that dominated the small room. The lid was propped open, inviting. May glanced at her watch. It was nearly 7. She still had 3 hours before her shift ended, and she was ahead of schedule tonight. She placed her cleaning rag on top of her cart and quietly closed the door. Then, with a deep breath, she sat down on the bench, her back automatically straightening, her shoulders relaxing. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment, then descended gently. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the room. May closed her eyes, letting her fingers find their way across the keyboard from memory. The music flowed through her like water, each note rising and falling with the natural rhythm of her breathing. This was her secret. These stolen moments at the piano when no one was around to hear. 25 years ago and half a world away, May had been someone else entirely. Li Mei Ling, the promising young pianist from a small town outside Beijing, whose talent had earned her a coveted spot at the Central Conservatory of Music. Her teachers had called her a natural talent, a rare find. Her mother had sacrificed everything to pay for her lessons, working 2 jobs and selling family heirlooms to keep her daughter's dream alive. May's fingers transitioned seamlessly into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her body swaying slightly with the music. She remembered her first recital at 12 years old, the rush of nervous excitement, the thunderous applause afterward. She remembered practicing until her fingers cramped, until the neighbors complained about the constant piano music coming from their tiny apartment at all hours. But then life had taken an unexpected turn. Her mother fell ill during May's 2nd year at the conservatory. Cancer. Aggressive. The treatments were expensive, far beyond what they could afford on their meager savings. May had no choice but to leave school and find work to pay the medical bills. 1 job became 2, then 3. Waitressing in the mornings, office cleaning in the afternoons, tutoring young children in basic piano in the evenings. For 3 years, she managed to keep up with the bills while her mother fought bravely. But in the end, cancer won. After her mother's death, May felt hollow. The piano, once her greatest joy, now reminded her of all she had lost. She sold her mother's piano to pay off the remaining medical debt and bought a one-way ticket to America, where her mother's cousin had once mentioned there were opportunities for a fresh start. America had not been the land of opportunity she had imagined. With limited English and no formal college degree, May found herself bouncing between service jobs, waitressing, housekeeping, elder care. Eventually, she had landed this custodial position at Rose Hill, and there was a certain poetry to it that she hadn't missed. She had come full circle, back to a place of music, even if she was now the one cleaning up after the musicians rather than making the music herself. The Chopin piece ended, and May sat in silence for a moment, listening to the final notes hanging in the air. Then her fingers found the keys again, this time playing Bach's Prelude in C major. The structured, mathematical precision of Bach had always soothed her mind. May often wondered what her life might have been if things had gone differently. Would she be performing on stages around the world, teaching master classes to talented students? Or would she have burned out, as so many promising musicians do, unable to handle the pressure of perfection? It didn't matter now. This was her life, simple, quiet, and mostly invisible. And yet these stolen moments at the piano brought her a peace she couldn't explain. The music was still inside her, waiting patiently all these years. As she played, May didn't notice the door cracking open slightly, or the wide-eyed young janitor who had recently started working the night shift standing there, listening in amazement. May finished the Bach piece and immediately began Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. Her fingers flew across the keys with lightning speed, leaping impossible distances with precision that would make professional pianists envious. The rapid notes sparkled like falling water, each one crystal clear despite the breakneck tempo. The young janitor, Thomas, stood frozen in the doorway. He had only been working at Rose Hill for 2 weeks and had barely exchanged more than a few words with the quiet older woman who handled the evening cleaning shift. He certainly hadn't expected to find her playing like a concert pianist in an empty practice room. May reached a particularly difficult passage, her left hand stretching to reach notes that seemed impossibly far apart, while her right hand danced through delicate trills. Her face remained serene, showing no sign of the physical difficulty. To anyone watching, it would seem as though the music simply poured out of her without effort. When the piece concluded with its thunderous finale, Thomas couldn't help himself. He applauded. May's eyes flew open, her hands jerking away from the keys as though they had suddenly burned her fingers. She turned to see Thomas standing in the doorway, a look of wonder on his face. That was amazing," he stammered. "I've never heard anyone play like that before, and I've heard a lot of the students here practicing." May's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She stood quickly, smoothing down her uniform. "I'm sorry." "I shouldn't be. I should get back to work." "No, please," Thomas said, stepping into the room. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just heard the music and, wow, where did you learn to play like that?" May busied herself with straightening the already neat sheet music on the piano. "It was a long time ago. Another life. But you're incredible. Better than the professors here." "Why are you working as a—" He stopped himself, realizing how the question might sound. May offered a small smile. "Life doesn't always go as planned, Thomas. Sometimes we end up very far from where we thought we would be." Thomas nodded slowly, but his eyes still held confusion. "Will you play something else, please? I promise I won't tell anyone if you don't want me to." May hesitated. It had been so long since anyone had heard her play. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Finally, she sat back down at the bench. "Just one more," she said quietly. "Then we both need to get back to work." She chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, letting the dark, brooding opening build into the passionate middle section. As she played, she felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest, a forgotten feeling, like waking up after a long sleep. Pride, joy, the simple pleasure of sharing music with another person. When she finished, Thomas was speechless for a long moment. "Thank you," he finally said. "That was a gift." May nodded, suddenly feeling shy. She stood and walked back to her cleaning cart in the hallway. "We should finish our rounds," she said, her professional demeanor returning. As they parted ways, Thomas turned back. "Will you play again tomorrow?" May paused. "Perhaps," she said softly. "We'll see." Later that night, as May rode the bus back to her small apartment, she found herself humming. For the first time in years, she felt a familiar itch in her fingers, a restlessness that could only be satisfied by playing. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone listen, to share the music that had always lived inside her. She looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. Tomorrow was the annual fundraising gala at the conservatory. All the wealthy donors and board members would be there, along with the faculty and selected students. May would be working, of course, keeping the refreshment tables stocked and cleaning up spills. She would be invisible, as always. Or perhaps, for once, she wouldn't be. The conservatory hummed with excitement on the evening of the fundraising gala. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light onto the crowd of elegantly dressed guests mingling in the grand foyer. Women in floor-length gowns and men in crisp tuxedos sipped champagne from delicate flutes, their laughter rising above the string quartet playing softly in the corner. May moved quietly among them, nearly invisible in her black service uniform. She carried a silver tray of hors d'oeuvres, offering them to guests with a polite smile and downcast eyes. No one thanked her. Few even looked at her face. She was simply a pair of hands offering food before disappearing back into the shadows. "More champagne over here," called a woman with diamond earrings that caught the light as she turned her head. May nodded and signaled to one of the other servers. The gala was the conservatory's biggest fundraising event of the year. Wealthy donors and influential board members gathered to pledge money that would fund scholarships, building renovations, and new instruments. Director Wong had stressed to all the staff how crucial tonight was for the future of Rose Hill. "Remember," he had said during their briefing earlier that afternoon, "these people can write checks that will keep our doors open for another year. Be invisible, be efficient, and above all, be perfect." May had nodded along with the other staff members. Being invisible was something she had mastered long ago. As she circulated through the crowd with her tray, May spotted Thomas across the room. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod. Since discovering her playing in the practice room the day before, he had treated her with a new kind of respect. It felt strange to be seen after so many years of blending into the background. Director Wong tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, calling for the crowd's attention. The room gradually fell silent as all eyes turned toward him. "Distinguished guests, esteemed faculty, and friends of Rose Hill," he began, his voice carrying across the foyer. "Welcome to our annual spring gala. Your generosity tonight will help shape the next generation of musical excellence." May used the distraction to slip away to the kitchen for a fresh tray of canapes. As she pushed through the swinging door, she nearly collided with Mrs. Blackwell, the head of the Board of Trustees. The older woman barely glanced at her, continuing her conversation with a tall man in an expensive suit as they moved toward the restrooms. "The problem with these schools today," Mrs. Blackwell was saying, "is that they've forgotten what true excellence means. They accept any student with money, not just those with real talent." "That's why donations have been down," the man replied. "People don't want to fund mediocrity." Their voices faded as they walked away. He felt a familiar tightness in her chest. How many truly talented students never got the chance to develop their gifts because they lacked money or connections? How many ended up like her, their dreams abandoned, their music silenced? She shook off the thought and collected a fresh tray from the catering staff. By the time she returned to the foyer, Director Wong was introducing the student performers who would provide the evening's entertainment. "First, we have Lily Chen, one of our most promising piano students, who will play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor." A young woman in a red dress approached the grand piano that had been positioned at the center of the foyer. The crowd applauded politely as she took her seat at the bench. May paused her serving to listen. Lily played well, technically correct, with good dynamics and phrasing. But May could hear the hesitation in certain passages, the slight rushing through difficult sections. The girl was talented, certainly, but she played with her fingers, not her heart. When Lily finished, the crowd burst into enthusiastic applause. "Remarkable," exclaimed a woman near May. "Such passion." May lowered her eyes and continued serving. 3 more students performed, a violinist, a cellist, and another pianist. Each played beautifully, and each received lavish praise from the audience. As the final student performer took his bow, Mr. Phillips, one of the wealthiest board members, raised his glass. "To the future of classical music," he proclaimed. The crowd echoed his toast, glasses clinking throughout the room. Mr. Phillips, flushed with champagne and the sound of his own voice, continued speaking. "You know what would be amusing? Let's hear from someone unexpected. What about—" His eyes scanned the room and landed on May, who was quietly replacing empty glasses on her tray. "What about one of our staff members? Surely some of the magic of this place has rubbed off on them." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Director Wong's smile froze on his face. "I'm not sure that's appropriate, Mr. Phillips," he said carefully. "Nonsense." Mr. Phillips waved his hand dismissively. "It would be entertaining. How about you?" He pointed directly at May. "Have you learned anything working around all these musicians?" All eyes turned to May. She felt her cheeks burning as she clutched her tray tighter. The room seemed to spin slightly. I should get back to the kitchen," she murmured. "Oh, come now," Mr. Phillips pressed, his tone becoming demanding. "We've all shown off our talents tonight. Surely you can contribute something, even if it's just chopsticks." More laughter followed his joke. Director Wong stepped forward, his eyes darting nervously between Mr. Phillips and May. "Perhaps another time. We should continue with our planned program." "I insist," Mr. Phillips interrupted. "It would be a bit of fun. Unless, of course, she's afraid." He raised an eyebrow challengingly. May could feel dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some embarrassed, some openly amused at her discomfort. She saw Tomas across the room, his face tight with anger on her behalf. In that moment, something shifted inside her. After years of being overlooked, of shrinking herself to fit into the background, a spark of her old fire returned. She carefully set down her tray on a nearby table. "I can play something," she said quietly. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Director Wong looked panicked. "That's really not necessary, May. Mr. Phillips was just joking." "No, I wasn't," Mr. Phillips countered. "Let's hear what she can do." He gestured grandly toward the piano, like a king granting a favor to a peasant. May walked slowly toward the grand piano. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. As she passed Lily Chen, the student pianist whispered, "Do you need the sheet music for something simple?" May shook her head. The crowd parted for her, creating a path to the piano that felt miles long. She could hear whispers following her. "This is rather awkward, and, poor woman, she'll embarrass herself. Wong should put a stop to this." When she finally reached the piano, May stood beside it for a moment, gathering her courage. Then she carefully sat down, adjusting the bench position slightly. Her hands were trembling. The room had fallen completely silent now, everyone watching with a mixture of curiosity and secondhand embarrassment. Mr. Phillips stood with his arms crossed, a smug smile on his face, clearly expecting a fumbling performance he could chuckle about later. May closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought of her mother, who had sacrificed everything for her music. She thought of all the years her fingers had ached to play, all the melodies that had continued to live inside her, even when she couldn't express them. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 filled the room, gentle at first, almost hesitant, like the first drops of rain before a storm. May felt the familiar weight of the keys beneath her fingers, the subtle resistance as she pressed them down. Her body remembered this even after all these years. A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd as the piece developed. The simple melody grew more complex, May's fingers dancing across the keyboard with increasing speed and confidence. The famous technical challenges of the piece, the rapid scales, the complex chord progressions, the delicate articulation, flowed from her hands as naturally as breathing. She forgot about the crowd watching her. She forgot about Mr. Phillips and his challenge. She forgot about the years spent cleaning floors and emptying trash cans. There was only the music, the magnificent architecture of Rachmaninoff's masterpiece rising around her like a cathedral, built of sound. When she reached the first movement's cadenza, perhaps the most notoriously difficult passage in all of piano literature, her hands moved with such speed they became almost a blur. Notes cascaded like waterfalls, chords crashed like thunder, and through it all ran a golden thread of melody, singing with heartbreaking clarity. She didn't see the stunned expressions on the faces around her. She didn't notice Professor Garcia, the head of the piano department, pressing his hand to his mouth in disbelief. She didn't see Lily Chen's wide eyes or Director Wong's slack-jawed amazement. The music consumed her completely. Every emotion she had suppressed over the years, grief for her mother, frustration at abandoned dreams, loneliness in a foreign country, poured through her fingers into the piano. The instrument responded to her touch like a living thing, resonating with her joy and her sorrow. As she approached the end of the first movement, May finally opened her eyes. The world came rushing back, The glittering chandeliers, the stunned faces, the absolute silence except for the notes pouring from the piano. She saw Mr. Phillips, his smug smile long gone, watching her with an expression of utter disbelief. The final chords rang out, powerful and resolute, then silence. For 3 heartbeats no one moved. No one breathed. It was as if time itself had stopped. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered against the high ceiling, people shouting, "Bravo!" and "Encore." Some were on their feet, others stood frozen in shock. Professor Garcia pushed his way through the crowd toward her, his face alight with wonder. May rose shakily from the piano bench. The sound of the applause washed over her like a wave, unfamiliar and overwhelming after so many years of silence. She gave a small awkward bow, unsure of what to do next. Director Wong reached her first, his face a mixture of astonishment and calculation. "May," he said, his voice barely audible over the continuing applause. "I had no idea. Why didn't you ever say anything?" Before she could answer, Professor Garcia arrived at her side. "Who taught you?" he demanded, his voice intense. "Where did you study?" That was extraordinary. Mr. Phillips stood nearby, his face flushed with embarrassment rather than champagne now. He couldn't meet May's eyes. As the applause finally began to die down, May found her voice. "I studied at the Central Conservatory in Beijing," she said quietly. "A long time ago." "Not long enough to forget how to play like that," Professor Garcia replied. "My dear, you have the hands of a concert pianist." Thomas had appeared at the edge of the crowd, beaming at her with pride. May felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes. After all these years of hiding, of being invisible, she had finally been seen. Really seen. And the music, oh, the music had still been there inside her all along, waiting patiently to be set free again. The morning after the gala, May woke before her alarm. Sunlight filtered through her thin curtains, casting a warm glow across her small apartment. For a moment she lay still, wondering if the events of the previous night had been a dream. Her fingers tingled slightly, as if remembering the feel of the piano keys beneath them. It hadn't been a dream. She had really played Rachmaninoff in front of a room full of wealthy donors and conservatory faculty. She had revealed her secret self, the musician who had been hiding inside the quiet custodian all these years. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. 3 missed calls and 5 text messages, all from Thomas. The latest one simply read, "Everyone's talking about you. Director Wong wants to see you ASAP." May sat up, her heart racing. What did that mean? Was she in trouble? Had she embarrassed the conservatory somehow? She quickly texted back, "I'll come in early. Is everything okay?" Thomas replied immediately, "More than okay. Trust me." May got ready with shaking hands, putting on her usual plain clothes, a simple blue blouse and dark pants, and pulling her hair back into its customary bun. As she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, she paused. The woman looking back at her seemed different somehow. Her eyes were brighter, her posture straighter. Something had changed. The bus ride to the conservatory felt longer than usual. May stared out the window, barely seeing the city streets passing by. Her mind kept replaying fragments of the previous evening, the initial humiliation of being put on the spot, the shocking transformation when her fingers touched the keys, the thunderous applause afterward. And most of all, the feeling that had rushed through her as she played, a feeling of coming home after a very long journey. When she arrived at Rose Hill, Thomas was waiting for her at the staff entrance. His face broke into a wide grin when he saw her. "There she is," he exclaimed. "The hidden virtuoso herself." May felt her cheeks warm. "Please don't, I'm still just the evening custodian." Thomas shook his head firmly. "Not anymore, you're not. Come on, Director Wong is waiting in his office, and he's not alone." As they walked through the hallways, May noticed people looking at her, really looking at her for the first time. Students whispered as she passed. A violin teacher who had never acknowledged her existence before nodded respectfully. "What happened after I left?" May asked quietly. She had slipped away shortly after her performance, overwhelmed by the attention and unsure how to handle the flood of questions. "Chaos," Thomas chuckled. "Everyone was asking who you were, where you'd studied, why you were working as cleaning staff." Professor Garcia was practically in tears, saying it was the finest interpretation of Rachmaninoff he'd heard in 20 years of teaching. "And Mr. Phillips, that jerk who put you on the spot. He looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock and die. They reached Director Wong's office, and Thomas gave her an encouraging smile. "Go on, this is going to change everything." May took a deep breath and knocked on the heavy wooden door. "Come in," called Director Wong's voice. She pushed open the door to find not just the director, but also Professor Garcia and Mrs. Blackwell, the head of the Board of Trustees, seated around a small conference table. All three looked up as she entered. "Ah, May." Director Wong stood gesturing to an empty chair. "Please join us." May sat down nervously, folding her hands in her lap. Am I in trouble for last night?" she asked. Mrs. Blackwell let out a short laugh. "Trouble? My dear, you saved the gala. After your performance, our donations doubled. Everyone wanted to contribute to the school that discovered such hidden talent. But I wasn't discovered here," May said softly. "I studied at the Central Conservatory in Beijing. Yes, Professor Garcia has been filling us in on what little you shared last night," Director Wong said. "But we'd like to hear the whole story if you're willing to tell it." And so, hesitantly at first, but then with growing confidence, May told them everything. About her childhood in China, her mother's sacrifices, her promising start at the conservatory. She told them about her mother's illness, her difficult choice to abandon her studies, and the years of struggle that followed. Finally, she explained how she had ended up at Rose Hill, finding a strange comfort in being near music even if she couldn't pursue it herself. When she finished, there was silence. Professor Garcia removed his glasses and wiped them slowly. "Such a waste," he said finally. "A talent like yours silenced for so long." "It wasn't a waste," May replied quietly. "I took care of my mother. She gave up everything for my music. I could give up music for her." Mrs. Blackwell nodded, an unexpected softness in her usually stern face. "That's admirable. But the question now is what happens next?" Director Wong leaned forward. "May, we'd like to offer you a different position here at Rose Hill." May blinked in surprise. "What kind of position?" "Assistant piano instructor," Professor Garcia said, "working with our intermediate students. The pay would be considerably better than your current salary, of course, but I don't have a degree," May stammered. "I never finished my studies. After what we heard last night, no one cares about a piece of paper," Mrs. Blackwell said firmly. "You play with more skill and feeling than most of our faculty, if Professor Garcia is to be believed." "It's true," the professor nodded. "Technical proficiency can be taught, but what you have, that connection to the music, that ability to make the piano sing, that's innate. That's what our students need to experience." May felt dizzy. This couldn't be happening. Just yesterday she had been invisible, just another member of the cleaning staff. And now they were offering her a teaching position. I don't know what to say," she managed. "Say yes," Director Wong smiled. "And there's more. Mrs. Blackwell has a proposal for you as well." The older woman straightened in her chair. "Several of our donors were extremely impressed by your performance last night. They've expressed interest in sponsoring a small recital. Nothing too grand to start, perhaps in our chamber music hall, just to introduce you to the music community here." "A recital?" May whispered. "You want me to perform?" "In public? Only if you feel ready," Professor Garcia assured her. "We could start with some coaching sessions, help you prepare a program. It's been some time since you've performed formally." "I understand. 25 years, May said faintly. "Well, based on what we heard last night, those 25 years did nothing to diminish your abilities," Mrs. Blackwell said. "Think about it. No pressure, but the opportunity is there if you want it." May's mind raced. Teaching students. Performing again. It was too much to process all at once. Part of her wanted to run from the room, back to the safety of her invisible life with its simple routines and minimal expectations. But another part, the part that had come alive last night when her fingers touched the keys, that part was already imagining what it would be like to play again, to share music with others, to reclaim the dream she had abandoned so long ago. Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course," Director Wong nodded. "Take the day, but we hope you'll say yes." As May left the office, her head spinning with possibilities, she nearly collided with Lily Chen, the piano student who had performed at the gala. "Oh," Lily exclaimed. "It's you. I've been hoping to find you." May looked at the young woman in surprise. "Me, why?" "Your performance last night." Lily shook her head in wonder. I've been studying piano for 15 years and I've never played like that. Never felt the music the way you do. I was wondering, would you consider giving me some coaching? Unofficial, of course. I could pay you. Before May could respond, another student approached the cellist from the gala. Excuse me, he said shyly. Are you the pianist from last night? The one who played Rachmaninoff? May nodded, increasingly bewildered by all the attention. I recorded your performance on my phone, he admitted. I hope that's okay. I've already watched it 10 times. The way you played that cadenza, he shook his head. Incredible. You recorded it? May echoed. Everyone did, Lily laughed. It's all over social media. People are calling you the cleaning lady virtuoso. Is it true you used to study in Beijing? May felt overwhelmed. Her private moment of music had become public, shared with people she didn't even know. It was terrifying and yet somehow exhilarating too. As more students gathered around her asking questions and offering compliments, Thomas appeared at her side. See, he said quietly. I told you everything would change. By lunchtime, May had received invitations to coach 4 different students, been asked for an interview by the school newspaper, and received a bouquet of flowers from Mr. Phillips with a card that simply read, My sincere apologies and deepest admiration. She escaped to her favorite practice room, room 12, where Thomas had first discovered her playing. It was empty as she'd hoped. She sat down at the piano not to play this time, but just to think. The piano had been her first love, her deepest connection to the world. For years she had kept that part of herself locked away, believing that chapter of her life was closed forever. But now unexpectedly a new door had opened. Did she dare walk through it? At 42, was it too late to become the musician she had once dreamed of being? What if she failed? What if she couldn't live up to the expectations created by one magical performance? She placed her hands on the keys, not pressing down, just feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. Then, almost without conscious thought, she began to play. Not Rachmaninoff or Chopin or any of the great composers, but a simple Chinese folk song her mother used to hum while cooking dinner. The melody was sweet and nostalgic, filling the small room with memories. I wish you could see this, Mom, she whispered as she played. I wish you could know that the music didn't die. As the final notes faded away, May made her decision. She would accept Director Wong's offer. She would teach and she would perform again. It wouldn't be the life she had once imagined for herself, the international career, the concert halls around the world, but it would be a life with music at its center. And that, she realized, was all she had ever truly wanted. 6 weeks had passed since the night of the gala, and May's life had transformed beyond recognition. She now walked through the conservatory's hallways with her head high, no longer invisible. Students greeted her by name. Faculty members nodded respectfully. And 3 times a week she taught piano in a bright corner studio with windows overlooking the garden. Today was her 4th lesson with Lily Chen. The young woman was talented but tense. Her technical skills impressive, but her playing mechanical. May watched as Lily's fingers raced through a difficult passage of the Chopin piece they'd been working on. Stop, May said gently. You're playing every note perfectly, but you're not saying anything with them. Lily sighed in frustration. I don't understand what you mean. The tempo is correct, the dynamics are as marked in the score. What am I missing? May thought for a moment. When you speak to someone you care about, do you watch a clock to time your words? Do you measure the exact volume of your voice? Of course not, Lily replied, looking confused. Music is a language, May said. Chopin has given you the words, but how you say them, that comes from inside you. She moved to the piano. May I? Lily nodded and slid over on the bench. May placed her hands on the keys and played the same passage Lily had just completed. The notes were the same, but suddenly the music breathed with life. Each phrase rising and falling like natural speech, the emotions clear and moving. That's what I can't do, Lily whispered when May finished. I can play the notes, but I can't make them sound like that, May smiled. You can. But first you have to forget about being perfect. Perfect is boring. Meaningful is beautiful. She tapped Lily's chest lightly. Play from here, not just from your fingers. As Lily began again, more hesitantly this time, but with greater attention to the emotional content of the music, May glanced at the clock. Her next student would arrive soon. a middle-aged businessman who had studied piano as a child and recently returned to it. Teaching adults was different from working with conservatory students. They brought life experience to their playing, but also tension and self-doubt. The door opened quietly and Professor Garcia slipped into the studio. He stood at the back listening as Lily continued playing. When she finished, he applauded softly. "Much better," he told Lily. "I can hear Ms. Lee's influence already." Lily beamed at the compliment. "Thank you, Professor. Same time Thursday?" she asked May. "I'll be here." May nodded. "Practice the second movement, but remember, feeling first, technique second." After Lily left, Professor Garcia approached the piano. "You're a natural teacher," he said. "You hear not just what they're playing, but what they're trying to play." "Thank you," May replied, still not entirely comfortable with praise after so many years without it. "Did you need something?" "Just checking in about the recital next week." "How are you feeling?" May's stomach tightened at the mention of her upcoming performance. Though she had agreed to the small recital Mrs. Blackwell had proposed, the reality of playing for an audience, a real audience, not just stumbling upon her private practice, was becoming increasingly terrifying as the date approached. "I'm preparing," she said carefully. Professor Garcia studied her face. "You're scared," he observed. "Wouldn't you be? After 25 years? He nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I suppose I would. But fear and excitement often feel the same in the body. The difference is only in how we think about them." May gathered her sheet music, avoiding his eyes. "My next student will be here any minute." "May," Professor Garcia said gently, "you don't have to do this recital if you're not ready. No one would think less of you for needing more time." She looked up at him then. "I would think less of me," she said quietly. "I've hidden for too long. If I back out now, I might never find the courage again." He smiled. "Then you will be magnificent. I've heard you practicing the Beethoven. It's going to be special." After her lessons were finished for the day, May walked to the chamber music hall where her recital would be held. The space was intimate, just 120 seats arranged in a semicircle around the Steinway Concert Grand. She had been practicing here after hours, getting used to the piano's action and the room's acoustics. The hall was empty now. May walked slowly to the piano and sat down on the bench. In just 7 days, this room would be filled with people, colleagues, students, donors, perhaps even music critics. The thought made her hands tremble slightly. She placed them on the keys and began to play the opening of Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata, the centerpiece of her recital program. The powerful chords resonated in the empty hall, building in intensity as the piece progressed. This was the music of struggle, of darkness battling with light, of human determination in the face of overwhelming odds. It spoke to her deeply. As she played, May tried to imagine the room full of people. Would she freeze? Would her fingers refuse to move? Would the music desert her in her moment of need? That doesn't sound like someone who's afraid. May's hands jerked away from the keys as Tomas's voice broke through her concentration. He stood in the doorway, a broom in his hand. "Sorry," he grinned. "Didn't mean to scare you. I'm on evening shift this week." "It's fine," May said, her heart rate slowly returning to normal. "I was just practicing." "Sounded more like battling demons to me," Tomas observed, walking down the center aisle toward the piano. "That piece has some fire in it," May smiled. In the week since the gala, she and Thomas had developed an easy friendship. He was one of the few people who had known her before, who saw her as both the quiet custodian and the passionate musician. "Beethoven wrote it during a dark time in his life," she explained. "He was losing his hearing, the worst thing imaginable for a composer. But instead of giving up, he created this monument of human spirit." "Sounds like someone else I know," Tomas said, leaning on his broom. "Someone who lost her music but found it again." May shook her head. "I'm not Beethoven." "No, but you understand his fight. That's why you play it so well." He gestured to the piano. "Keep going. I'll just work around you." As Thomas began sweeping the aisles, May returned to the Beethoven. Having another person in the room was good practice for the recital. She needed to learn to maintain her focus despite distractions, to stay connected to the music even when aware of being observed. She was deep into the second movement when she noticed Tomas had stopped cleaning. He stood absolutely still, the broom forgotten in his hand, his eyes closed as he listened. Something about his complete absorption in the music gave May a sudden confidence. This was why she played, not to impress with technical fireworks, but to create that transcendent connection between souls that only music could achieve. When she finished, Thomas opened his eyes. If you play like that at your recital, people won't just applaud, they'll weep. The day of the recital arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that matched May's nervous mood. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with fragments of music and imagined disasters, missing notes, memory slips, falling off the bench. Now, as she stood backstage in the simple black dress she had purchased for the occasion, her hands felt cold and stiff. 5 minutes, Ms. Lee, the student usher informed her with an excited smile. May nodded, unable to speak. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of the audience filling the chamber hall. Director Wong had told her they had added extra chairs to accommodate the unexpected demand for tickets. Professor Garcia appeared at her side, elegant in his formal concert attire. Remember to breathe, he advised. And don't rush. The music needs space to speak. What if I forget something? May whispered. What if I make a mistake? Then you will make it beautifully, he replied with a gentle smile. Music is not about perfection. It's about truth. Before she could respond, the house lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. It was time. Professor Garcia squeezed her shoulder encouragingly and then walked on stage to introduce her. May heard his voice, calm and assured, talking about her extraordinary journey and the privilege of presenting her to the musical community. Then he was saying her name, and the audience was applauding, and somehow her feet were carrying her out onto the stage. The lights were brighter than she expected. The faces in the audience blurred together. May managed a small bow, then moved to the piano. As she sat down adjusting the bench, she caught sight of Thomas in the back row. He gave her a thumbs up. May placed her hands on the keys. The moment of truth had arrived. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. Her program opened with Bach, the clear mathematical precision of his prelude and fugue in C minor creating a foundation of calm. As her fingers found their way through the familiar patterns, May's racing heart began to slow. The music was there as it had always been. Waiting for her to give it voice from Bach, she moved to Chopin, the nocturne in E-flat major that she had played for Thomas that first evening when he discovered her secret. The piece flowed like water, each note connecting to the next in an unbroken line of melody. May felt herself relaxing into the music, trusting it to carry her forward. And then it was time for the Beethoven. As she paused before beginning the Appassionata, May glanced out at the audience. In the third row, she spotted Mrs. Blackwell sitting very straight, her usual stern expression softened with anticipation. Next to her was Mr. Phillips, the board member whose challenge had started this whole journey. He caught her eye and nodded slightly, as if in apology and encouragement. May turned back to the piano and launched into the sonata. From the first powerful chords, she knew this performance would be different from any of her practice sessions. There was an electricity in the air, a connection between her and the audience that seemed to amplify every emotion in the music. As she played, images flashed through her mind. Her mother's proud face at her first recital, the cramped apartment where they had lived, the hospital room where she had said goodbye. She thought of the years of silence, the quiet dignity of her life as a custodian, the moment when music had returned to her like a long-lost friend. All of it, the joy and the sorrow, the struggle and the triumph, poured through her fingers into Beethoven's magnificent creation. When she reached the thunderous final movement, her hands flying across the keyboard with passionate intensity, May felt as though she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The final chords rang out in the hall, powerful and definitive. May's hands lifted from the keys and hovered in the air for a moment, the sound continuing to resonate around her. Then she lowered them slowly to her lap. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then the audience erupted. They rose to their feet as one, applause thundering against the walls of the small hall. "Brava!" someone shouted. Others joined in, the calls multiplying as the applause continued. May stood shakily and bowed. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was not a time for sadness, but for joy, for the completion of a circle that had been broken for 25 years. As she straightened from her bow, she saw Professor Garcia approaching with a bouquet of flowers. Behind him, her students were clapping wildly, Lily Chen actually jumping up and down with excitement. "You see? Professor Garcia said as he handed her the flowers. Not just applause. Tears, too, he gestured toward the audience, where indeed many faces were wet with emotion. May looked out at them all. These people who had never noticed her when she cleaned their floors and emptied their trash cans, who now stood in appreciation of her art. It was strange and wonderful and a little bit terrifying. But mostly, as she took another bow and the applause washed over her like a cleansing wave, it felt like coming home. 1 year had passed since May's first recital. The calendar on her office wall, yes, she had an actual office now, was marked with lessons, rehearsals, and upcoming performances. The small potted plant on her windowsill, a gift from Thomas, stretched toward the sunlight. Photographs lined her desk, one of her mother, faded with age, another of May with her students after their spring showcase, and a newspaper clipping with the headline, Hidden Virtuoso Dazzles in Debut. A knock on her open door pulled May from the stack of applications she was reviewing. Professor Garcia stood in the doorway, his silver hair neatly combed, his bow tie slightly crooked as always. Ready for the meeting? He asked. May nodded and gathered her notes. Just finishing up with these scholarship applications. Any promising candidates? Several, May said as they walked together down the hallway. There's a young man from rural Idaho who's been teaching himself piano using YouTube videos. His technique needs refinement, but his musicality is extraordinary. And a girl from the South Bronx who's been playing on a keyboard with missing keys but still manages to create beautiful music. Professor Garcia smiled. Sounds like you have a soft spot for unconventional paths to musical excellence. I suppose I do, May acknowledged with a small smile. They reached the conference room where Director Wong and several other faculty members were already seated around the large table. Mrs. Blackwell was there too, her iPad open in front of her, reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Ah, May, Director Wong stood to greet her. We were just discussing the new outreach program. Please sit down. As May took her seat, she marveled silently at how much had changed. A year ago, she would have entered this room only to empty the trash bins or wipe down the table after hours. Now she was part of the discussion, her opinions valued, her expertise recognized. As I was saying, Director Wong continued, the board has approved funding for our community music initiative. May, we'd like you to head the program. May blinked in surprise. Me? But I've only been teaching here for a year. Which makes you perfect for the role, Mrs. Blackwell said matter-of-factly. You understand what it means to have talent without access to resources. Who better to lead a program designed to find and nurture musical gifts in underserved communities? Professor Garcia nodded in agreement. Your journey from custodian to celebrated pianist has inspired many people, May. The video of your gala performance has over 2 million views online. You've become something of a symbol of perseverance and hidden potential. May felt her cheeks warm. She still wasn't entirely comfortable with her newfound fame. The media attention after her first recital had been overwhelming. Interviews, feature articles, even a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell her story. She had declined most of these requests, preferring to focus on teaching and rebuilding her performance skills. What exactly would the program involve? She asked. Director Wong leaned forward. Free music lessons for children who couldn't otherwise afford them. Workshops in public schools, community concerts, essentially, bringing classical music to people who might never set foot in a concert hall. And a scholarship fund, Mrs. Blackwell added, to identify truly exceptional talents and bring them here for proper training, regardless of their financial circumstances. May thought about it. The past year had been a whirlwind of changes, from anonymous custodian to piano instructor, from solitary practitioner to public performer. She had adjusted to her new life, finding joy in sharing music with her students and gradually becoming more comfortable on stage. But this would be something different, a chance to use her unique experience to open doors for others. I would need help, she said finally. A team of teachers willing to work in different neighborhoods, someone to handle the administrative side. All provided, Director Wong assured her. We want you as the face of the program, the artistic director. Your story resonates with people, May. It gives them hope. After the meeting, May walked to the practice room where her advanced students were gathered for their weekly masterclass. As she approached, she heard piano music, a familiar piece, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. She paused outside the door, listening as Lily Chen played the same piece that had changed May's life a year ago. Lily's interpretation had grown tremendously. There was confidence in her playing now, and a willingness to take emotional risks. As the music built toward the cadenza, May felt a surge of pride. This was what teaching was about, not just passing on technical skills, but helping students find their authentic musical voice. She opened the door quietly and slipped into the back of the room. The other students sat in a semicircle around the piano, some following along with scores, others simply absorbing the music with closed eyes. Thomas was there too. He had enrolled as a part-time student after discovering his own musical interests, sitting slightly apart, his head nodding in time with the music. When Lily finished playing, the room erupted in applause. She looked up, saw May, and broke into a wide smile. "I was hoping you'd hear that," she said. "I've been working on it all semester." "Beautiful work," May said, moving to the front of the room. "You've made it your own." "I had a good teacher," Lily replied. "We all did." She gestured around at the other students, who nodded in agreement. "Well, today I want to talk about performance anxiety," May said, taking a seat. "Something I know quite a bit about, as you can imagine." For the next hour, she led a discussion about the psychological aspects of performing, how to channel nervous energy, how to stay connected to the music even when afraid, how to recover from mistakes. Her students shared their own experiences and fears, creating a space of mutual support and understanding. "Remember," May told them as the class wound down, "perfection is not the goal. Connection is. Connect with the music, connect with yourself, connect with your audience. That's what matters." After the students had gone, Thomas lingered behind, helping May gather her teaching materials. "You know," he said casually, "I was thinking about the day I first heard you play, how different things might be if I'd been sick that day, or if I'd taken a different route through the building, or if I hadn't given in to the temptation to play," May added. "Exactly. All these little choices that seemed so small at the time. And now look, you're about to lead this big new program, you're performing regularly, you've completely changed your life." May considered this. "Not completely," she said. "I'm still the same person inside, just more visible now." "Speaking of being visible," Tomas said, handing her a flyer, "the orchestra asked me to give you this. They're doing Rachmaninoff's third next season and want to know if you'd consider being their soloist." May took the flyer, her heart skipping a beat. Playing with a full orchestra, it was something she had dreamed of as a young student before life took her in a different direction. It would be the biggest performance of her new career by far. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she said honestly. "That's what you said about the recital, and the master class, and the faculty concert," Thomas reminded her with a grin. "And yet here you are, doing all those things brilliantly." Later that evening, May sat alone in the chamber music hall where she had given her first recital. The space had become a sanctuary for her, a place to think, to practice, and sometimes just to sit in silence, surrounded by the possibility of music. She placed the orchestra's flyer on the piano and stared at it for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and looked at the email that had arrived during the faculty meeting. An invitation to perform at an international piano festival in Beijing. A chance to return to where her journey had begun, to play in the city where she had first fallen in love with the piano. So many opportunities, so many paths opening before her. It was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. May's fingers found the keys, and she began to play, not anything from her performance repertoire, but a simple Chinese lullaby her mother used to sing. As the gentle melody filled the empty hall, she thought about how life moves in circles, bringing us back to our beginnings in unexpected ways. The next morning, May arrived at the conservatory earlier than usual. She had made her decision. She would accept the role as director of the Community Music Initiative. She would begin preparing for the Rachmaninoff with the orchestra, and she would go to Beijing, returning as an accomplished musician to the city she had left as a struggling daughter. But first, there was something else she needed to do. She made her way to the custodial department in the basement of the building. The staff room was simple but comfortable. A few worn couches, a small kitchenette, a bulletin board covered with notices and schedules. Several of her former colleagues were having coffee before starting their shifts. "May," exclaimed Rita, the head of housekeeping, "what brings you down to our humble domain?" I wanted to talk to all of you about something, May said, suddenly feeling nervous. These were the people who had worked alongside her for years, who had known her when she was just another person in a Navy uniform with a cleaning cart. As the room filled with curious custodial staff, May explained the Community Music Initiative and her role in it. Then she took a deep breath and continued. But I want to do something else as well, something more personal. I'd like to offer free piano lessons to anyone on the custodial staff who might be interested, or your children or grandchildren. No experience necessary. There was a moment of surprised silence, then Rita laughed. You think any of us have hidden musical talents? I think everyone has hidden talents, May replied seriously. And I think everyone deserves the chance to discover them. She looked around at the familiar faces. You were my family for 7 years. You treated me with kindness and respect when I was invisible to everyone else in this building. Now I want to give something back. Slowly, hands began to raise. Rita's grandson, who had always loved music. The night janitor who had sung in a choir back in his home country. The groundskeeper who had always wanted to learn an instrument, but never had the money for lessons. As May wrote down names and began to arrange times, she felt a sense of completion. The circle was closing. The hidden virtuoso had been found, and now she would help others discover the music within themselves. That evening, May stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, studying her reflection. The woman looking back at her was not so different from the custodian of a year ago. Perhaps a little better dressed, her posture a bit straighter, her eyes brighter with purpose. But essentially the same person who had cleaned floors and emptied trash cans, who had played piano in empty rooms when no one was listening. She thought about all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment, her mother's sacrifices, the years of struggle, the chance encounter with Thomas, the humiliating challenge at the gala that had become her moment of triumph. None of it had been easy. All of it had been necessary. On her bedside table lay a framed photograph of her mother, smiling proudly after May's first childhood recital. Next to it sat the program from her debut performance a year ago. And beside that, her new business cards. May Lee, Director of Community Music Initiative, Rose Hill Conservatory. May smiled at her reflection. We made it, Mom, she whispered. The music never died after all. It was just waiting for the right moment to be heard.